The auditorium lights flickered low, casting a playful glow across the crowd. Laughter filled the air, sharp and unkind, as John Neely Kennedy's name was called. The room buzzed with anticipation, not because anyone thought he'd impress them, but because they expected a show of another kind, as something to laugh at. Someone in the back whispered, "This ought to be good," while a group of students near the stage stifled their giggles. It wasn't meant to be an honor when they asked him to sing at the town's community talent show. It was meant to be a joke. John Kennedy, never one to shy away from a challenge, stepped onto the stage with a slow, measured pace. His worn boots tapped against the wooden boards, echoing through the silence that followed the laughter. He was no stranger to being underestimated. Growing up in a small Louisiana town, he'd been mocked plenty for his drawl, his quiet demeanor, and the way he carried himself with old-fashioned manners. But what most people didn't realize was that inside him burned a spirit that didn't bend easily under ridicule. He stood at the microphone, his hand steady even as the crowd waited for him to falter. "Well," he said with a slight smile, "y'all asked me to sing, so I reckon I will." His voice, calm and warm, spread across the room. It wasn't what they expected. He began slowly, letting the words roll out like honey. At first, the audience chuckled. A few even elbowed each other. But then something changed. John's voice carried with its rawness a depth that no one anticipated. It wasn't polished like a trained singer's, but it was heartfelt, honest, and powerful. Each note carried the weight of experience, of a man who knew what it meant to endure hard times and still stand tall. By the time he reached the chorus, the room had gone completely silent. The laughter that had filled the air minutes earlier was gone, replaced by something far stronger: respect. Among the crowd was a panel of judges. One of them, a stern woman with glasses perched on the edge of her nose, had been watching him closely. She leaned forward, her expression softening. Another judge, a retired music teacher, whispered, "That boy's got soul." But it wasn't just the judges who felt it. A mother in the audience, holding her daughter's hand, wiped away tears. A group of teenagers who had mocked him before sat frozen, realizing they'd underestimated the man they thought would embarrass himself. The notes John sang carried stories of resilience, of family, of the kind of everyday struggles that everyone in that room had lived through in one way or another. His voice wasn't just singing, it was speaking to their hearts. When the final note faded, John stepped back from the microphone. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, heavy and expectant. Then, the applause came in, not polite, not forced, but thunderous. People stood to their feet, clapping and cheering, their faces lit with awe. John, ever humble, gave a small bow. "Thank you kindly," he said, his eyes glistening with a mixture of pride and disbelief. He hadn't come to prove anything. He hadn't come expecting applause. But in that moment, he knew something had shifted. When the winners were announced later that evening, John Neely Kennedy's name was called once again, and not as the punchline of a joke, but as a finalist who had earned his place with heart and courage. He walked back onto that stage, not to laughter this time, but to a wave of admiration. The same people who once mocked him now saw him differently, and not as the quiet man they thought they could laugh at, but as someone with a voice worth hearing. That night, John walked home under the stars, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. He thought about the irony of it all, how people had tried to set him up for humiliation, only to watch him rise instead. And as he passed the small houses lining the street, he realized something important. Life will always have people who doubt you, who try to use you as the punchline in their story. But when you meet those moments with courage and authenticity, you don't just change their perspective, you change yourself. The next morning, people stopped him on the street, shaking his hand, telling him how moved they'd been. The young girl who'd watched from the crowd shyly ran up to him and said, "Mr. Kennedy, I want to sing one day too, just like you." And with a gentle smile, John knelt down and told her, "Don't you ever let anyone make you feel like a joke." Your voice matters. Always remember that. The story of that night spread through town and beyond. What started as a joke turned into an unforgettable moment of truth, a reminder that sometimes, when the world expects you to stumble, the best thing you can do is stand tall and sing anyway. And John Neely Kennedy did just that. By the end, the message was clear: never underestimate someone's voice, because behind it may be the strength to change hearts and inspire generations.